Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 has come to an end, and despite everything that has been going on behind the scenes with Studio Mappa and the staff, I think I can safely say that this is probably one of the best seasons of Jujutsu Kaisen, but it also demonstrated that the shonen genre is not over, and there's still a lot of things that the shonen genre can show that can be just as impactful, emotional, and mind-blowing as any other shonen series that is out there. I think Jujutsu Kaisen really demonstrated how sometimes breaking shonen tropes and breaking the typical shonen formula can be something that is worth doing because it could leave a lasting impact. And despite the season already being over, it's going to take a huge while for anybody to stop talking about Jujutsu Kaisen based on everything that they saw with this season, because as everyone stated, this arc and this season alone not only changed people's opinions on Jujutsu Kaisen, but it also changed the direction of Jujutsu Kaisen as a whole. Of course, this mostly applies to anime only, because people like me who have actually read the manga series and have actually read the entirety of this arc knew what was going to happen, and we just were excited to see it finally get animated. But still, I'm not going to lie that the first time when reading this entire arc, I was completely mind blown on everything that was happening, and it just gave me more of a reason to love Jujutsu Kaisen. Now, of course, I have to briefly talk about the arc that happened before the Shibuya incident arc, this being of course the arc that focused on Geto and Gojo's past, showing us the friendship that they had and how it all came crashing down after one particular mission. I really did enjoy how season 2 animated all of that, because it just greatly shows us more about the Jujutsu world of Jujutsu Kaisen, and it also kind of gives us an understanding of why Geto would eventually become a villain and why his thought process quickly changed due to something that happened in the past. But of course, while this arc was great, the Shibuya incident arc will be the one that will be the biggest highlight of this entire season. This arc mainly focused on Geto trying to steal Gojo, because I think everyone by now knows that Gojo is probably one of the most powerful characters in Jujutsu Kaisen. So it's not surprising that some of these antagonists of this series are trying to steal Gojo. And while at first many people believed that this wasn't going to work, what makes this arc really special is how it completely is unpredictable, as very quickly we see that Geto was able to steal Gojo. And this of course was a massive shock, because everyone thought that Gojo was somehow going to survive this whole ordeal, but in the end that was not the case. And to make things even more shocking, we come to find out very quickly in the beginning of this arc that Geto isn't actually Geto. In fact, it's somebody else that is using Geto's body. Now, I know some people are confused as to why this is considered a shocking twist, but for those who have actually watched or read the prequel to Jujutsu Kaisen, this being Jujutsu Kaisen 0, you would know that Geto in the end is defeated, and it seems that he's about to lose his life. So of course, when seeing Geto now, you kind of got the assumption that Geto somehow survived that whole situation, but as we come to find out in this moment that Geto did not in fact survive, and this is in fact somebody else using his body. So that means all this entire time, all those moments where we saw Geto from season 1 was not in fact him, it was somebody else. And this will only be just the beginning. Like I mentioned earlier, Gojo was actually sealed in these moments, and once we thought that this was going to be a very easy mission because of Gojo, now becomes harder, because now we're left to wonder what's going to happen to the other characters, because not only do they have to worry about making sure that the villains are defeated, but now they have to find some sort of way to save Gojo. And speaking of characters, one thing that a lot of people tend to always criticize when it comes to shonen is that you know very well which characters are going to make it and which are not. That is always something that a lot of people have criticized with the shonen genre, is that some characters clearly have plot armor since they are considered to be one of the most important characters to that series. But Jujutsu Kaisen is not one of those series. In fact, they kind of just simply broke this trope entirely, as characters that you thought were going to survive, or characters you thought that they weren't going to be harmed in any way, were the ones to actually either die or be seriously injured. And the two best examples of this was Nanami and Nobara. When we were first introduced to Nanami, we saw him as a very strong character and somebody that would be very hard to defeat. And while that was the case for most of the part of this arc, we will very quickly see that nobody was safe, and this included Nanami, because he was actually almost burnt to death by Jogo, which by the way, he wasn't the only one. There were other characters like Maki that were actually almost killed, but you can see the damage that Nanami had after that whole battle. And to make things even worse, once he encountered Mahito, at that point everything was over, because you knew that even though he was strong, he didn't stand a chance against Mahito and his condition. And to make things even more worse, Yuji, the main character, had to witness this death with his own own eyes. You have to keep in mind that Yuji had a very strong respect towards Nanami because of everything he was doing and how he was trying to save people from evil curses. So to see somebody that he greatly respected be killed just like that, it's no wonder why Yuji started to completely lose it. And this wouldn't be the only time that Yuji would see somebody he cared for deeply be killed or seriously injured, as one great example once again is Nobara, who is one of the most important members of Yuji's group. We have seen this from time to time with the shonen genre, how there's always a trio that stands out the most and is probably the most important characters of that set series. We've seen it in Naruto, My Hero Academia, and Chainsaw Man have trio groups, and for the most part, most of the people in that trio usually survive. But of course, if you have been keeping up with the most recent shonen series like Chainsaw Man and Jujutsu Kaisen, has shown us that even the people in the trio group aren't saved and also have death flags as well. And Nobara was one of these people, as during her fight with Mahito, which it seemed that Mahito clearly saw how dangerous Nobara is. Despite the Mahito that she was fighting was a clone, when she encounters the real Mahito, Mahito once again shows us just how ruthless he is. He slaps her in the face, and if there's one thing you know about Mahito's powers is that once he touches you, it's pretty much over. And sadly, once again, Yuji was able to witness this, as when Nobara realizes that it might be the end of her life flashes before her eyes, and her believing this is her last few moments tells Yuji one last thing, telling him that she had fun and that life wasn't so bad after all, before something happening to her face which results in her losing one of her eyes. And it seems that that's the end of her. And of course, Yuji is distraught over all this because somebody that he deeply cared for is once again on the floor, completely lifeless. And it's already bad enough that Yuji is experiencing all this because even moments before all this was happening, he was already breaking down and was clearly reaching his breaking point. Since before all this was happening, Sukuna actually managed to take over his body once again due to certain characters giving him more fingers to eat. And as a result of this, once again, Sukuna showed us just how much of a dangerous and menacing thing he is, as he caused so much destruction that Shibuya didn't even look like Shibuya anymore. It was all just simply a pile of rubble after all the fights that Sukuna had involving other characters or curses he had to deal with. And of course, once Yuji returned back to normal, he saw all the destruction that Sukuna did and the amount of lives that Sukuna took because of all this. He of course is starting to lose it, and you can see our main characters starting to break, as in these moments it's very emotional. And I've had to give props to the voice actor of Yuji, showing us just how distraught Yuji is, as he even wishes for him to no longer exist. He wants somebody to end him because at that point he believes that if he's killed, then hopefully that will also mean that Sukuna will no longer exist as well. This is just another clear example of just how much Yuji is going through in these moments, and just how not everything is always going to be perfect for the main character. There's sometimes criticisms, especially with any kind of series involving main characters, that there is no stakes with the main character. Usually the main character is always the one to save the day, or they usually have some sort of hidden power that they could do to defeat all the villains in that arc. But in this moment, that is not the case. Yuji feels completely powerless. He feels like no matter how much he tries, nothing is going to work. And at this point, it just seems that the bad guys are going to be in complete victory. Of course, thanks to Todo later on, Yuji doesn't give up that easily and is determined to at least fight till the very end. But not every character in this arc was a character that you can sympathize with or you felt bad whenever you saw them in a tough situation. There are characters in this arc that greatly showed us their true colors and the kind of people that they are. And this, of course, is greatly shown with Mei Mei. Now, Mei Mei didn't get a lot of appearances in season 1 and at the beginning of Jujutsu Kaisen. There were brief moments here and there that did show us Mei Mei. This even included the arc about Gojo and Geto's past, but we didn't really get a whole moment that showed us the kind of person Mei Mei is. But very quickly we will see just how really messed up Mei Mei as a character is, as we see this very weird and very disturbing relationship with her and her brother. And while yes, she does show that even though she may not have a very powerful ability, she's still a very capable fighter. That is all thrown out the window when we see that not only did she leave the fight in Shibuya Shibuya, but she also has this very infamous moment that a lot of people who have read the manga know very well, in which we see her in the same bed as her brother. And at that point, I think everyone got the picture of what kind of person Mei Mei is, and at this point it was no surprise that whenever you saw people discussing her, they were very quick to compare her to other characters like Makima from Chainsaw Man. And if you know anything about Makima as a character in that series, you would know that she is not also a great person either. And it seems that these two are very good at doing some very questionable and creepy things. And like I mentioned earlier, she left the fight, meaning that she really had no interest in saving Shibuya or defeating the villains. It seemed that she had her own priorities, which of course had to do with money. There's even a moment in which she is calling somebody, telling them to pretty much get all their stock money from the stock market out of Japan, because it seems that she knows very well that Japan is going to have some sort of crisis, and that really the good guys aren't going to win, that the Jujutsu sorcerers aren't going to be able to eliminate the threat that easily. So yeah, just another reason why so many people are now starting to dislike Mei Mei. Not only did she leave the fight, has no intentions of stopping the threat, does very unsettling things with her brother, but showed us that everything she does is always for monetary purposes. Like, she won't do anything if money is not involved, which gives us a very clear picture that not every Jujutsu sorcerer is always trying to save people. It's very clear with Mei Mei that some of them are doing it for a paycheck. Of course, it's not to say that we didn't get any satisfying moments in this arc. Like, not everything was depressing. There were some very good moments, and some characters got good karma. Of course, I'm talking about Mahito here, because during his fight with Yuji, he was very confident that he was going to be able to defeat Yuji, and once he was seeming to be all powered up, and it seemed that Yuji had no chance on defeating Mahito at this stage, Yuji, despite getting help from Todo, was still able to go one-on-one against Mahito, and he actually was able to bring Mahito down. And in his moments, which of course Mahito believed to be his final moments, all he felt was fear and was scared of Yuji, because even though he was trying so desperately to escape Yuji, Yuji was just simply walking very slowly, as he knew that no matter where Mahito went, at the end of the day, Yuji was going to finish him for everything he has done. And I think that was a really great moment, because it showed us that somebody who thought of themselves as to be all this powerful individual was now crawling in desperation, trying to get away from the person that can actually finish them. It's no wonder why Mahito was always so cautious of Yuji and used everything he got against him, was because he was an actual threat. For Mahito, Yuji was the only person that was a huge threat for him. So seeing Mahito realize that this could be the end of him was so satisfying to see, because he deserves everything that he is going to get because of everything he has done, from taking people's lives like it was nothing, to getting rid of people that Yuji cared about, taunting Yuji any chance he got. It was great to see that this overconfident thing finally be put on his place. And even though unfortunately Geto was there to save Mahito from Yuji towards the very end, we see that Geto was just simply going to use Mahito regardless for the final stages of his plan. And even though the remaining good guys, and surprisingly even characters that we didn't think were going to be siding with the good guys, like Chozo for example, who at first was a villain, but then after finding out that Yuji was his brother somehow, he decided to start teaming up with Yuji. And then of course we have the return of Yuki, which was a character that was introduced during the whole hidden inventory arc. But even with these new allies, it still wasn't enough to fully defeat Geto. And at the end of the day, their last fight wasn't even a fight, as Geto was not really interested in fighting till the very end, because he succeeded. His main goal was to seal Gojo, and that's exactly what happened. Sure, not everything went smoothly as he wanted to, but as long as his main goal succeeded, that's all that really matters. And I think it is a very good example of how it seems that the good guys have one last chance to defeat the bad guys. It doesn't really matter, because the bad guys overall won the entire thing. Geto succeeded of what he wanted to achieve, and even though he did lose some people from his side, he didn't really care for that, because he has no interest in that kind of stuff whatsoever. Remember, this isn't Geto anymore. This is somebody using his body pretending to be him. And as if things couldn't get even more shocking, towards the very end, we are seeing the return of Yuta, who, for those who don't know who he is, he was introduced in the prequel, this being Jujutsu Kaisen 0. Now it seems that he's been tasked to execute Yuji once again due to everything that happened in Shibuya, which wasn't only the terrible outcome to come after the whole Shibuya incident, because it seems that the Jujutsu headquarters are trying desperately to make excuses. Not only have they stated that Gojo was involved in the whole incident, which now as a result makes Gojo not only seen as a bad guy, but now he's actually being kicked out of the Sorcerer Society, and now anybody that tries to unseal him is now considered a crime, which just goes to show us why Gojo never respected any of the higher ups of the Jujutsu headquarters, because things like this just prove that they are just really trying hard to blame somebody for this entire thing instead of, trying to find an actual solution to this entire ordeal. Not to mention that they're the reason why Yuta needs to execute Yuji, because now that Gojo is no longer around and Gojo was the reason why Yuji's execution was suspended, they want to get rid of Yuji as fast as possible, because as you all know, he is the vessel of Sukuna. So at the end of the day, no one really got a good ending in this arc. Everyone just is now in shambles, and it seems that the only people who did have something good happen to them was the villains, this being Geto with his overall plan. But that's what makes it all the more interesting, because now you're trying to figure out what is going to happen next. What is going to happen to our cast of characters that are still remaining, and how are some of these characters going to get through this very tough situation, especially Yuji, because it seems that he is primarily the one being targeted. So it's going to be interesting to see how he gets out of this entire situation without Gojo's help anymore, because beforehand with Gojo he was able to survive the execution, but now that he's no longer here, what's going to be his next plan? And that is something that I'm really looking forward to see. I have read a couple of chapters after the whole Shibuya incident arc happened, and I'm not going to spoil too much because I know there's some anime onlys that may be watching, but all I'm going to say is that there's still more shocking things to come ahead and to just look forward to it. It's already been announced that the next arc is already in production, which is good, but you also have to keep in mind that there's other projects that Mappa is working on quite recently. I mean, they have to animate Hell's Paradise. They also have announced recently the new Chainsaw Man movie involving the Reze arc, and now they have to focus on this. So I wish nothing but the best to the Mappa staff, because I mean, this is just a lot of projects that they're going to have to focus on. But yeah, that's pretty much it. This arc really did change the entirety of Jujutsu Kaisen, and I'm not going to be surprised that the next upcoming arcs are just going to be more insane than ever. But yeah, that's about it. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.